The hum of the road was my lullaby. It had been for weeks now, ever since I packed up my life into the back of my trusty old van and set out to see America. Coast to coast, that was the plan. No schedules, no commitments, just me, the open road, and the vast, beautiful, sometimes terrifying expanse of the US. I loved it, most of it anyway. The freedom was intoxicating. Waking up to a different view every day, drinking my coffee while the sun painted the sky in hues I'd only seen in postcards. It was everything I'd dreamed of. Almost. Tonight though, the hum felt less like a lullaby and more like a low, persistent thrum of unease. I was somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska probably, or maybe eastern Colorado. The states blurred after a while. I'd pulled off the main highway a few hours ago, looking for a quiet spot to spend the night. Found a dirt road that wound its way into a small, desolate patch of woods, barely more than a few scattered trees. It felt secluded and safe, or it had. I'd cooked up some ramen on my little portable stove, watched the last sliver of sun dip below the horizon, and was just settling in with a book when I saw it. Headlights, not passing, not pulling in, just stationary. They were a little ways off, maybe a quarter mile down the dirt road, but they were bright. Too bright. And they were pointed right at my van. I figured it was just someone else looking for a spot, maybe a late-night hunter or fisherman, though it was getting late for that. I shrugged, pulled the curtain tighter over my side window, and tried to focus on my book. But I couldn't. The light was relentless. It seemed to pierce through the thin fabric of my curtains, casting long, distorted shadows that danced on the walls of my van. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was nothing. But the light wasn't moving. It wasn't dimming. It was just there, shining. My heart started to pick up its pace, a slow, nervous beat against my ribs. I peeked through a tiny gap in the curtains. The headlights were still there, unwavering. And now, I could make out the faint outline of the vehicle. A truck, a big one from the looks of it. Okay, this was weird. Why would someone just sit there, shining their lights on my van? It felt deliberate. Like they were watching me. A shiver ran down my spine, despite the warmth inside the van. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were broken down. Maybe they were just trying to signal me for help. But the thought was quickly dismissed. If they needed help, they'd get out, wave, honk. They wouldn't just sit there like a silent, glowing predator. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Of course. I was truly in the middle of nowhere. I sat there, frozen, listening. The only sound was the distant chirping of crickets and the frantic thumping of my own heart. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The light never wavered. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. This felt wrong, dangerously wrong, and I needed to move. With trembling hands, I quietly started the van. Every little sound seemed amplified in the still night. The click of the key, the groan of the engine turning over. I kept my eyes glued to the rearview mirror, but the light was so blinding, I couldn't make out any detail of the truck. I put the van in reverse, slowly backing out of my spot, then turned onto the dirt road. The headlights followed my every move. They didn't dim, didn't swerve. They just tracked me. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. I drove as fast as I dared on the bumpy, unpaved road, dust billowing behind me. I didn't look back until I reached the main highway. Even then, as I sped away, I kept glancing in my mirror. Nothing. The light was gone. A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it made my knees weak. I took a deep, shaky breath. Okay, I whispered to myself, just a weirdo. You're safe now. I drove for another hour, maybe more, until I found a small, dimly lit truck stop with a few other RVs and vans parked for the night. It wasn't the secluded nature spot I usually preferred, but tonight, the presence of other people felt like a lifeline. I pulled into a spot, tucked away near the back, and tried to calm my racing heart. I made a cup of tea, trying to regain some semblance of normalcy. The warmth of the mug in my hands was comforting. I told myself it was over. I was being paranoid. Just a one-off weird encounter. I drew the curtains tight, double-checked the locks on the doors, and tried to relax. The sounds of distant truck engines and the occasional hum of conversations from other campers were oddly soothing. I laid down on my bed, pulling my sleeping bag up to my chin. It took a while, but eventually, the exhaustion of the day, combined with the adrenaline crash, started to take its toll. My eyelids felt heavy. I was finally drifting off. Then, the light. It wasn't as bright as before, not direct, but it was there. A soft, diffused glow filtering through the back window of my van. My eyes snapped open. No. No way. My heart immediately started pounding again, a frantic drum solo against my ribs. I sat up slowly, my breath catching in my throat. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to confirm what I already knew. But I had to. I crept to the back window, my movements slow and deliberate, as if making a sound would conjure the light into a terrifying, solid form. I carefully pulled back the corner of the curtain. And there it was. The truck. It was parked at the very edge of the truck stop parking lot, facing my van. The headlights were off now, or at least dimmed to a faint glow. But I could clearly see the silhouette of the massive vehicle, dark and imposing against the faint glow of the distant highway lights. And it was facing me. It felt like a punch to the gut. How? How could it be here? I had driven for so long, put so many miles between us. And it was still here. Still watching. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a random weirdo. This was something else. Someone was following me. Panic began to rise, a bitter taste in my mouth. My mind raced, trying to find an explanation. Why me? What did they want? Was it a joke? A terrifying, elaborate prank? But nothing made sense. The sheer persistence, the silent, unwavering presence, it was chilling. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I had to move again. This time, I was faster. I didn't hesitate, I jammed the key in the ignition, started the engine, and threw it into drive. I peeled out of the truck stop, not even bothering to look in my rearview mirror until I was a good mile down the highway. Nothing. Still nothing behind me. But I knew it was there. I could feel its presence, a cold, invisible hand on my back. I drove like a maniac. The speedometer needle crept higher and higher. I passed towns, then cities, the lights blurring into streaks of color. My eyes darted between the road ahead and the rearview mirror, constantly checking. Every set of headlights that appeared behind me sent a fresh jolt of fear through my body. I kept thinking of every horror movie I'd ever seen, every true crime documentary. This was how it started. The isolated victim. The relentless pursuit. I needed to disappear. I needed to lose them. I remembered seeing a sign for a rest area a long time ago. I wasn't sure how far back it was, or if I had passed it, but I clung to the idea. Rest areas usually had other cars, other people. Maybe I could blend in. I drove and drove. Hours passed. The sun began to hint at its return, a faint lightening in the eastern sky. My eyes burned, my body ached, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't risk it. Finally, I saw a sign. Rest area 1 mile. Never had a sign looked so beautiful. I pulled in, my van practically shuddering with relief. This rest area was bigger than the truck stop, with more cars, more light, more activity. I found a spot at the far end, tucked in between a massive RV and a minivan. I killed the engine and slumped against the steering wheel, exhaling a breath I felt like I'd been holding for hours. I was safe. For now. I had to be. I'd put so many miles between us. They couldn't possibly know where I was. I pulled out my phone again. Still no signal. Of course. My panic flared briefly, then subsided. I was too exhausted to be truly scared anymore. Just weary. Bone weary. I decided I would stay awake until the sun was fully up, then assess my options. But my body betrayed me. The lack of sleep, the prolonged terror, it was all catching up. My head lolled against the seat. My eyelids felt like lead weights. Just a few minutes, I told myself. Just a short nap. I'll be fine. I leaned my head back, closing my eyes. The sounds of the rest area faded into a distant hum. The hum of the road, once my lullaby, was finally replaced by the sweet, sweet darkness of sleep. I don't know how long I was out. It couldn't have been long, maybe an hour at most. But I was ripped from sleep by a sound that sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated terror through every cell of my body. A scraping sound. It was outside my van. Near the front. And it was coming from the driver's side door. My eyes flew open. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate bird trying to escape its cage. My breath hitched in my throat. Scrape. Scrape. It was distinct. Metallic. Like something hard being dragged across the paint, or someone trying to jimmy the lock. Oh God. Oh my God. They were here, they had found me again. I was paralyzed. My mind screamed at me to move, to do something, anything, but my body wouldn't obey. I was a statue, frozen by an invisible, terrifying force. The scraping stopped. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Then, a faint click. My blood ran cold. That was the sound of a lock. My lock. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing, praying, begging for it to be a nightmare. But the cold, hard reality of my van, the scent of stale coffee and fear, told me otherwise. I heard a faint creak. The sound of my driver's side door, just barely cracking open. My eyes snapped open. I couldn't breathe. Through the narrow gap in my curtains, I could see a shadow. A large, dark shape against the faint pre-dawn light. It was tall. Too tall. My van was small. I had nowhere to hide. My only weapon was a can of pepper spray tucked under my seat, but I couldn't reach it. I was trapped. I held my breath, every muscle in my body tensed. I could hear their breathing now, slow and deliberate. They were trying to be quiet. They were in my van. A hand reached through the crack in the door. A gloved hand. It fumbled for a moment, then it reached for the inner door handle. This was it. This was how it ended. A guttural scream tore from my throat, a primal sound born of pure terror. It was loud, raw, desperate. The hand recoiled. The door slammed shut with a bang that echoed in the confined space of my van. Footsteps. Heavy, hurried footsteps. Running away. I scrambled up, my body shaking so violently I could barely stand. I fumbled for the locks, pushing them down, twisting them, securing every single one with trembling fingers. I grabbed my pepper spray, my hands slick with sweat. I peered through the front windshield. The rest area was still mostly dark, the other campers still asleep. No one had heard me. Or if they had, they were too scared to come out. I stared at the spot where the truck had been parked. Nothing, it was gone again. But I knew they would be back. I had to get out of here. Now. I started the van again, my hands shaking so much I almost dropped the key. I threw it into reverse, then drive, and sped out of the rest area, not caring how much noise I made. I didn't care about gas, or directions, or anything but getting away. I drove for what felt like days. I bypassed every rest stop, every town, every sign of civilization. I didn't stop for gas until my tank was practically empty, and even then, I chose a brightly lit, busy station with surveillance cameras. I filled up, paid inside, and was back on the road in minutes, my eyes constantly scanning, constantly checking the mirrors. The sun rose higher, painting the sky in a blaze of orange and pink. The world woke up around me. Traffic thickened. People went about their morning routines, oblivious to the terror that had gripped me for the past 12 hours. I was exhausted beyond words. My eyelids felt like sandpaper. My body ached with tension. But I couldn't stop. The image of that gloved hand reaching for my door was burned into my mind. The sound of the lock clicking open. The silent, relentless pursuit. I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to sleep in my van tonight. Or any night soon. I needed to find a hotel. A real hotel, with a lobby, and a front desk, and other people. A place with 4 solid walls and a locked door that wasn't a flimsy piece of metal. I eventually found a small motel in a bustling town, pulled into the parking lot, and practically stumbled into the lobby. The kind lady at the front desk gave me a sympathetic look. I must have looked like death warmed over. I checked into my room, locked the deadbolt, and pushed a chair against the door for good measure. I turned on every light. The television blared, its noise a welcome distraction from the buzzing silence of my own fear. I stood in the shower for a long time, letting the hot water wash over me, trying to wash away the lingering chill of terror. But the fear remained, a cold knot in my stomach. I eventually collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, the pepper spray still clutched in my hand. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak, every distant siren, every rustle of the wind outside. The next morning, I woke up with a start, my heart pounding. It took me a moment to remember where I was. The motel room, safe. I still enjoy my van life, but I'm much more careful where I decided to bunker down and sleep.
But if I lay down and I play dead, Baby, you got